Okay, so Jessica Bean is the principal investigator, principal author, and principal project designer of Understanding Global Change, which is a project of the University of California Museum of Paleontology. Understanding Global Change is a guide to how human action and non-human processes interact to change the Earth's environment and its habitability. In this project, Jessica developed a suite of online and interactive learning materials that support educators and students to explore the Earth as an interconnected, dynamic system. The UGC resources, co-designed with classroom teachers and leaders in climate education, are integrated with research-based teaching practices that utilize modeling of phenomena to make learning visible and support the investigation of local and global actions that reduce human impacts on global environments. In this webinar, you will learn about the UGC project tools for teaching about climate and energy using clean resources. So take it away, Jessica, and anyone else, feel free to put any thoughts that you have in the chat. I'll be monitoring that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's an honor, as always, to be here and be able to share my work with the clean community. So again, thank you for having me. And please check out our website, and you can follow us on Twitter, just some information. And again, my name is Jessica, and I'm based at UC Berkeley within the Museum of Paleontology. And today I'll share a number of resources connected to the Understanding Global Change project. And I just want to point out that this tool is one of many that are already in existence and places you can go for climate and energy related resources, including clean. And of course, referring to our climate literacy, energy literacy, and ocean literacy principles and concepts. But a lot of the work that I've done on this project is really focused on also being responsive to next generation science standards. So ensuring that teachers have tools in the classroom to plan and to actually implement in ways that are truly responsive and three-dimensional. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But one of the graphics that I use quite often to sort of summarize the goals of the Understanding Global Change project is that we're really trying to move away from students learning discrete bits of information or facts about climate and global change and the Earth system and how it works, and really shifting towards building knowledge. So making very concrete connections across concepts. And so this really allows for also transference of knowledge and understanding across different domains and different phenomena. And so we really want to support this shift from just teaching information to teaching to build knowledge. So to do that, there are three primary components to the Understanding Global Change project that have been developed over a number of years. The first, which I will share with you in this talk, is a conceptual framework to help you really organize and connect climate and environmental change concepts throughout the year. So again, this can be used as like a planning tool, but also something that can be student facing. And then tools that are really meant for helping students construct explanatory models about the Earth systems. So how do they really understand and make their thinking visible about what they're learning? And then finally, resources for really designing coherent units. I'll talk a little bit about that. So how do you create a unit of 2 to 4 weeks where you're really connecting big ideas and asking students to synthesize information over time? So these are sort of the three main components of the Understanding Global Change project, again, that have been built out over the last few years. And I do want to point out that that was not done just by our internal group at Berkeley, but we've also collaborated with some amazing programs and groups, including CLEAN and HHMI, BSCS, as well as Miller and Levine Biology textbook for high school, which has incorporated this work into their programs. But the work I'm going to highlight today really focuses on work, again, that I've done with elementary school teachers and students, which has been supported and done in collaboration with the River Otter Ecology Project and the Marin County Office of Education. So I will be sharing some more information, especially about that River Otter Ecology Project with you in a bit. But this is one of sort of many partnerships that I have across the country where we've done ongoing workshops with different districts and communities over time. Okay, so just an overview of today. I'm going to do a review of some of the UGC and also CLEAN resources that can help you in thinking about the teaching practices you can use for addressing climate change in elementary level education. We're going to be looking at river otters as a phenomenon, as a way to anchor learning about environmental and climate change. You'll just note that I'll be switching to blue slides when we're sort of going to be in, or blue background slides when we're going to be in learner mode, when I'm going to want you to participate as learners, and we're going to do some breakout rooms and Jamboarding, which will be fun. And then I'm going to introduce to you the UGC framework and the Earth system modeling tools. And then very briefly at the end, I'll give you a UGC website tour. So I really want to make sure you're aware, if you're on this call, of the amazing resources that are available on the CLEAN website. And again, that I use as guidance for the work that I do at the elementary level. So I'm going to put some links in the chat. So this is the main guidance on elementary teaching about climate and energy available on the CLEAN website. But the one I want to point you to directly right now is now the second link, which really is the teaching strategies. How do we teach something that is so complex to elementary students? And the first thing I want to say is that you, as elementary educators, you are laying the foundation for how students will be able to tackle this complex topic later in their education, in their learning. So it's really important that you, again, lay these foundational skills of, support data literacy and interpretation, encourage action and solution-centered learning, right? Even if it's not about global climate change, what are local actions that you can be taking to understand climate and environmental change? Always make it personal and relevant, okay? And culturally sustaining. Here's some other tips from that list. So again, grounded in place-based learning. Foster that empathy and perspective and caretaking. So this is why we've been using this guide to really support our thinking in the way we're designing elementary focused resources and programs within understanding global change. And CLEAN has also provided a breakdown of those fundamental concepts. Again, how do you lay the groundwork for understanding climate change? Well, the standards are there, right? The disciplinary core ideas within the NGSS are there for what you need to then be able to understand climate change in middle school and high school and beyond. So for example, one of these topics around biodiversity and humans, one of these disciplinary core ideas, really has to do with how populations live in a variety of habitats, and that changes in the environment in those habitats, right, affects how and where organisms live. So this is one of the fundamental concepts that we'll explore today when we talk about our river otters in the San Francisco Bay Area. So again, this is connected to climate because climate affects everything, right? About how and where organisms can live, their food, their water, their air, their space, all of these essential resources. And so changes in the environment will affect where we find certain species and how they live. And this is very much connected to our understanding of climate change. And I just want to call out again, because we're trying to be very three-dimensional in the work that we're doing here, that today we're going to be thinking about asking questions and defining problems and developing and using models as our two primary NGSS science and engineering practices. And as far as our cross-cutting concepts, we are going to be engaging in thinking about building systems, thinking about systems and system models. And of course, these are two examples of performance expectations that you would see at the elementary level that include all three of those dimensions and that would be relevant to some of the work that we're doing here today. So for example, develop a model using an example to describe ways the geosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere interact. Or at the third grade level, construct an argument with evidence that in a particular habitat, some organisms can survive well, some survive less well, and some cannot survive at all. So again, how would we work towards these performance expectations, and how would we ground this learning in a particular place, in a particular time, make it relevant, right, to our elementary students? And so that's what I'll be sharing with you today. And finally, just in thinking about systems and system models, which we're going to be building, the NGSS defines a system as an organized group of related objects or components, models that can be used for understanding or predicting the behavior of systems. So we want students to be building models from a very early age so that they have this skill, again, as the models and the scenarios and phenomena become more complex as they understand climate an ecosystem changes. And so finally, I just want to share with you that, there are these big shifts, right, in terms of implementing and supporting learning in this three-dimensional way. So the three main shifts are first, again, as I said before, trying to do less around just scientific facts and really helping students construct explanatory knowledge. And we can do that through using explanatory models, right? Having them actually represent relationships and processes and phenomena. The second shift is really about engaging all students in scientific thinking. So again, using those science and engineering practices and moving from just learning about science to figuring things out, right? So that they're doing their own thinking and processing. And finally, from rote to meaningful use of scientific practices. So the students really understand why they're doing what they're doing and how it actually furthers their own thinking and their scientific goals. So a lot of these shifts and these teaching practices that I use come from ambitious science teaching, which again, really emphasize student discourse and explanatory modeling, which allows opportunities for thinking, which I said before, making ideas public, and those public ideas can then become resources for others. And it really can help you as a teacher also understand who's silent and maybe why they're silent or not participating. And it provides authentic opportunities to actually practice using scientific ideas and language. So we're going to do a little bit of that today, I promise. I'm going to stop talking at you in just a second. But again, our work today is going to be focused around a particular anchoring phenomenon, which I'm defining based on, again, ambitious science teaching, which are practices in response to next generation science standards, which define a phenomenon as a puzzling event or process whose full explanation requires a wide range of science ideas to be coordinated with one another and with evidence. So the idea is that if you have an anchoring phenomenon for a unit of study, this will take potentially weeks to figure out, and students are going to have to use a lot of ideas and data, various forms of evidence to construct an explanation. And your role as the teacher is to create opportunities every day for student sense making so that they are processing information and connecting big ideas. And why do we do this? Why do we use anchoring phenomena? Because we know that, again, based on even what those clean practices recommend, we know that students learn best if content is embedded in contextualized problems or issues in a place that connects to their lives. And again, allows students to really revisit ideas over time and increase their depth of knowledge over time throughout a unit. And finally, we really want to provide opportunities for students to revise ideas and get feedback from others and synthesize new information and incorporate that into their thinking. So again, that was a lot of background information about why we do what we do and the way that we do it. But again, that sort of sets the stage for the exploration that I want us to do here today. So we're going to shift now into our learner mode. We're going to be like putting on our learner hats. That doesn't mean you can use all of your full adult knowledge. Feel free to use any of your prior knowledge. You don't have to pretend to be an elementary school student, but what I would love is for you to participate as a learner in thinking about the phenomenon that I'm going to present to you today. So I'm going to present river otters to you as an anchoring phenomena that would be used for a unit of study for over, at least 2 to 3 weeks of instruction in a K through 5 classroom. So to start us off, I would just like you to share either in the chat or by unmuting yourself. What do you know about river otters? You can write your ideas down, but then feel free to share them out. If we did this in a classroom, we'd do this as probably a think, pair, share, just to get everyone talking. But feel free to chime in. So what do you know about river otters? Anything you think you might know from your prior knowledge. All right, I see playful swimmers are cute but dangerous. Okay, I want to know more about cute but dangerous. They are adorable. Okay, awesome. Any other thoughts? They have the bite capacity of a wolf. Wow, I wonder what that means. Okay, they like to slide. Interesting. So some behavior. Like to eat crawdads. Cool. So again, some great things you've either observed or from prior experience, or maybe you want to learn more about their behavior, what they eat, what they look like. They roll around in the water. Okay, awesome. Great. So I want to tell you a little story about river otters in the San Francisco Bay Area. So in 1995, this was a map that was published by the California Department of Fish and Game, now Fish and Wildlife. So a lot of the schools that I work with are right in this area. The pink represents where river otters are found. What do you notice and what do you wonder about this map? And again, feel free to unmute yourself or put in the chat any ideas and I can read them off. Okay, so why aren't they in the southern half of the state? Great question. They live along the coast and inland. Yeah, it's interesting. They seem to be in both areas. Anyone else? What else do we notice or wonder about this map? A few spots of habitat. Why? So I think maybe you're referring to some of these little spots out here. Big range, mostly Northern California. Why is there a large hole in the middle of the upper range? Yeah, what does this mean? And then Deborah saying, I assume they live along river valleys. Do they actually live near rivers? It seems that they live on the coast too. Okay, interesting, right? So are they restricted to are they river otters or can they be near any body of water? Are there any in Oregon? I assume so. Okay, right. So this just cuts off at California, but do they extend beyond this? It's a great question. Okay, awesome. So we're noticing some interesting things about their distribution based on, again, this 1995 range map. So now I just want to share with you that there were some stories that started coming out in the 1980s and the 1990s, that there were some observations being recorded in this area, in the Bay Area where they had not been seen before. And I just want to share with you a quick video of what this looks like when we observe otters. So this is actually a camera trap, a camera that is motion censored, and it caught the otters on camera. And actually, I'm going to just do a new share really quickly because I want you to hear the sounds from the river otters. Okay, so now you should be able to hear the video when I play it. Can't hear, it's very quiet. Might not be able to hear it yet. Okay, awesome. So this is just one of the many observations that started to happen in the later 90s and into the 2000s. I'll just share some other pictures with you really quickly. This is a river otter that hopped onto a boat in San Francisco Bay. There was also an otter sighting in Lake Merritt. So just to give you some context, Lake Merritt is in the middle of Oakland. So in a city, you can see the buildings in the background, and here's our little otter. We started to see them in San Francisco, out at the coast along San Francisco, and they gave this guy the name Sutro Sam because he lived by an area called the Sutro Baths. So again, these are areas that students in our classrooms would be somewhat familiar with, and we could look at detailed maps to show them where these things are. But overall, there were just more and more reports. This is from April 2015, that river otters were coming back to the Bay Area where they had not been seen before. And again, we're not part of that 1995 range map. So here's a map with just some of those spots from those sightings that I just showed you. And as it turned out, as more and more data came in, this is when a colleague of mine who works for the River Otter Ecology Project started to get more and more data from the public. She asked people to report where they were seeing otters, and she actually set up an online platform for anyone to put in observations. So this is her map. As of last year, I believe. So this is the otter spotter map from the River Otter Ecology Project. So as you can see, these otters are definitely being observed in areas, especially over the last 10 years, in places where they were not seen prior to the 90s. So I would like us to think about this map, right? What we're observing here and the other images and videos that I showed you. And what I'd like you to do is write down questions that you have about the otters based on that data and evidence. So if you go to that the link that was just put into the chat, that will take you to a Jamboard where you can start adding some questions. So you can place your sticky on, you can make a sticky on the Jamboard. So just so you know, Jamboard is a tool I've been using a lot. It's a digital whiteboard. It's great for both synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And you can see all the activity that's going on the Jamboard. Unfortunately, the work's anonymous, so some teachers find that to be a problem. But it's great because you can have students working in groups and online and collaborate in that way. So if you want to make a sticky, you'll click on this button here. And as you make a sticky, you might look for other questions that are like the question that you came up with to see if you have any similar ideas. And you could group your sticky with other stickies that have similar questions. Any questions about generating questions about the otters? I'm going to flip over to the Jamboard. All right. So I see one question so far. What causes otter populations to move? See, people are still logging in. Okay, great. And I see, what are family groups? What kinds of habitat do otters need to live? Awesome. What are different ways to move? Okay, interesting. What foods do they eat? Do otters migrate? Okay, these are awesome questions. Keep them coming. And again, try to group your question with similar questions. Human impacts on otter habitat. Okay, interesting. Great. Any others? So I see that you grouped that human impact question near what kind of habitats do otters need? Okay, and food's kind of related to that, right? So why are they long and skinny? Okay, interesting. So sort of a form and function question, right? Why did they evolve to look the way that they do? Have rivers or water areas changed to provide habitat that otters would like? Okay, awesome question. So again, that question about habitat, great. It's a bit morbid, but I'm generally curious. Why did the dead otters seem to be all in the same general region? Actually, that's a really good question. So where do we see otters dying? And I actually was speaking with Megan Isidore, who's the primary biologist for this group this morning, and she was asking a very similar question about like where otters survive, especially the pups, the babies. So again, a really great question. Does what they do or eat change based on the time of year? Okay, great. Do otters like mud? Awesome. So again, any these things about their habitat. Okay, just another like 10 seconds and then we're going to move on. These are great questions. So again, a lot of questions about where otters live, how they move, what do they eat, how do they behave, how do they organize themselves into family groups, right? Like where do they survive, what do they need? So all of these are very important and interrelated questions. And I'll just point out, very reflective of the disciplinary core idea that I called out earlier and its connection to climate change, right? Around how organisms survive in changing environments. Okay, so here's just a list of example questions actually that came from another workshop that I did with teachers, which are very similar to yours. So again, like, you know, how long do river otter families stay in groups, like the moms and the babies or dads around? Why is it increasing across Marin, which is that area just north of San Francisco? What changes over time in habitat caused more river otter sightings in the Bay Area? What happened to cause their range to change? What do they look for and need? I think you asked a lot of questions around those things. And then can the health of the watershed impact the ecosystem within it? So including the otters. So all great questions. So from that, we can really come up with sort of a big driving question, right? We need to understand like what has changed in this environment. So why have those river otters expanded their range in the last 40 years? What has changed? So just take a minute actually and just write down some ideas on your own paper. What are some big reasons that you would think of as at the top of the list of like what would explain why those river otters have changed their range in the last 40 years, have expanded their range into the Bay Area? And you can put some of those in the chat if you have a chance, that would be great. Okay, I'm seeing less hunting, food source or water source changes in the food chain. Okay, a lot about food, interesting. Anyone else? Climate change, different temperatures, yep. So what are the conditions under which they're living? Yep. Anything else that we want to consider here? Disease, okay, interesting. Water pollution. Great, so now we're getting some more, and maybe air pollution, closer to human food they might be eating. More otters, more competition, interesting. So I would want you to expand on some of these ideas. These are great, but getting more specific, right? About access to food, less otters, more places to go. Okay, this is great. Okay, so you have a lot of ideas that you're working on. Wonderful. So again, I want you to be thinking about this map that I showed you, right? That where all these otters are now living and expanding. So just for reference, this is San Francisco. And this is Marin County, where again, a lot of the schools I work with are located. And so these areas were not part of the original, the 95 map. They were not included. I also want you to take a quick look at this map of where we live now. So the dark red are the most densely populated areas. And then you'll notice that there are a lot of areas that are pink and even some green because these are wildland areas. But you know, this is an area that's very highly populated in reality. There are a lot of people who live in these areas. And so this map is also on your Jamboard that you're going to work on, so you can reference this again and take a closer look at it. But I just wanted to share it with you now, because what we're going to do is actually engage in that modeling practice now and think about constructing a model to represent our thinking and the ideas that you just put in the chat about what would have been changing the otter range in the last 40 years. So I just want to give you some instructions before I'm going to send you out into breakout rooms to do this work collaboratively. So first, I would like for everyone to talk and agree on some things before you start writing. So take at least a minute or two and talk and say hi to your partner or your other group members. You can use words or diagrams or arrows to represent what you think you can see, like what you would observe in the environment that the otters are living in, and maybe things that you can't easily see, right, with your naked eye. And just keep in mind that there are many ways to communicate your ideas. So again, you could use words and arrows and diagrams and sticky notes and whatever you want within that, that Jamboard. So the purpose of this model is just to get your ideas out, right? There's no correct answers yet. And the idea is that we'll be improving our models as we learn more about the otters over time. So don't worry about not feeling like you have all the answers. So each person could use a different color pen or sticky note so that we can see that everyone's contributing ideas. Also, keep writing down your questions. If more questions pop up as you're working, write those down and keep those on sticky notes. So I'm going to give you at least 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll come back together. And in a classroom, you would provide at least 30 minimum. So again, this is a very short, compact experience modeling what you would do in a classroom. So this is what the Jamboard looks like. So I gave you 2 sides of this Jamboard to think about what did the world look like 40 years ago in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, what does it look like today, and what has changed over time that has led to the otters expanding their range? So I've given you all of the instructions are on the Jamboard too, in case you want to review those. And I've given you some icons that you can use to construct this model. So a little otter, which you can duplicate, right? You can make copies of it and make more than one. Water and little grass, and also some ideas for you to think about that I know some of you represented in your what you've been sharing out during the hour. So ideas about like human impacts, right? So like fish, someone mentioned hunting specifically. So how has hunting maybe changed, or how has pollution changed, or how has urbanization and building cities and where people live and how we interact with the environment changed? How does that affect? So you can move these icons around and position them and use them in your model that you're making with your group. So these are again, the 3 possible causes of change that you had mentioned that we will include. And I just want to point out that Jamboard is kind of interesting because it makes you look like you don't have much space sometimes, but there is a zoom button. So you can zoom in really far and make the text really big, so it's easier to read. So just don't forget about that zoom button. Okay, so I think, I don't know if that's the right one. So the link is in the chat, and I'm going to put you in breakout rooms really quickly now.
And you'll assign us groups as well, Jessica?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually,
so we know which Jamboard, because if you guys will notice, there's like a group 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the Jamboard.
Yep. And I just realized I don't think I have co-hosting privileges, so I can't make those quite yet. If you would let me do that. Sorry.
Alicia, do you think it'd be easier for you to do it, unless, because I don't know how to make
I also don't have the privileges, but all you have to do, open the participants and then click on one of our names, like Jessica's or mine, and then you can I think it's under more, click make that person host.
Okay. There we go. Thank you, Alicia.
Awesome. Okay, now I can see everyone. So now I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. I'm also going to keep one of the groups in this main room, if that's okay, just because we'd love to like record you. And again, we don't have to, you don't have to show your video. But I think it would be great to have that available for people to see. So let me just assign some of you to breakout room. Okay. Great. So I'm going to open the room, but if you don't see a notification, it means you're just going to stay in this group, and you'll be group 2. So group 1 is going to a breakout room now. So there we go. Okay. And the group here will be group 2. So if you go to the Jamboard, you're going to go to slide 3 to start your model.
All right. So, Carolyn. Are we, so I've kind of had to float in and out, which is unfortunate here. So is this from the maps that you've shown us that we're thinking about this?
Based on the maps, but also just your prior knowledge and thinking. So just getting your
Okay.
ideas out on, and so the maps are also in the Jamboard. I think they're on slide 9. I'm actually gonna shift them. Yeah, if you wanna see the maps again.
Ah, there we go. Okay, good. I was trying to think of how we were supposed to gather information on
Yep.
this.
Yeah.
And just remind me, sorry, I also had to step out because West Coast, we were still in dismissal when this started. Anyway, but the yellow dot map, was that 40 years ago? Sighting?
No, that's now. So
Now.
that's where now, which is very different than what it looked like 40 years ago. Yeah, I can show you again the map from 40 years ago.
Yeah, or can you throw it in the Jamboard somewhere too?
Yep, let me do that. So this is the range map from 40. Here, let me
Oh,
get
that's okay, gotcha.
out the stars. Yep, this
I think
one.
it's so polite that they stop right at
No,
the
it's
border
very
of Oregon. I just thought, you know, the otters are very border.
Yes, right.
So the yellow map then is showing that it's much spottier, so it's not covering it thoroughly, that they're in smaller
Oh.
or localized areas. Is that, am I reading that right?
So those are individual observations. So what that means is that they're being spotted in areas where they weren't originally seen in that range map. Does that make sense?
So these are new locations.
The yellow dots, yes, are new.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
And I am putting the range, the old range map on slide 10 in the Jamboard if you want to look at that again. Oh, looks like I did.
I'm just gonna move them to the slide we're looking at, and then we can move them and delete them later, but just so
Oh,
I
you're
have
so
to keep
good.
clicking back and forth.
Good for you. I like
I
that.
went to Zoom school last year. I got some, no, okay. So 40 years ago and today. And then I'm also like, what part of the map is? Where's my little, oh, okay. Where's San Francisco? I'm like, point of reference. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, right.
All
So
right.
it's a little bit different. So that's
I have it scaled the same. Hold on.
so is that focusing on this area here?
I think it's like, oh, ooh, draw tool, smart. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Because this, like this little, I was using that little point here as my reference, and I think that's this little point there, right?
Yeah, and I was looking at the lakes, the inland lakes. It's kind of
Okay.
Okay.
So what do we think? Why have otters expanded their range in the last 4 years? It would,
So again, no need to have the right answers, and you can use the little icons on the right side.
is it just Laura? Is it just you and I that are building
I
this?
think, yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
And everybody else is watching. No. Okay. So what do we think?
So for why,
Yeah. Why have they expanded their range? I'll just move this up out of their way. We can mentally our little circles, I think. Can I delete our circles?
Well, it can't be because there's less people. At least I wouldn't think. It doesn't seem like a.
Less people, or well, or more people, and so it would drive out some, but then some would stay behind. I
That's great. Start writing those ideas down.
don't know.
Yeah, again, and you can put a question mark by them if you're not sure. Like, yeah, just make those ideas visible. It's great.
Okay.
So I'm going to write, why would they expand range if more population expanding?
Sure. Why is my sticky note see-through? Sorry, I shouldn't be distracted by that. That's interesting. Okay.
It's called I'm not sure.
Or maybe did they move in search of food?
I mean, to me, hunting, fishing, if there's hunting and fishing regulations, that's.
Yeah. I feel like, let's see why. I would like a black line master of this part of the map that I can draw. No. And like draw arrows of like where they should be and then where they went. No. Maybe I can just do it on this map. But San Francisco.
So
I'm just trying to like.
maybe there's more fish in the water.
Awesome. Write that down. So we're just going to give you a few more minutes.
So they expanded their range. Sorry, I'm still like processing the map a little
No
bit.
worries. And again,
Um,
that's why this would be a much longer activity with students.
Yeah.
It would be at least a full hour to give them the map and have them interpret that plus the modeling.
Yeah. Well, I think they're still definitely along the river. I mean, assuming that the purple on the 40-year-old map is along a river, and then there's like a yellow cluster around that river.
More water flow. Maybe there's a dams that have.
Oh, so then they might not be able to hunt in the river, so they'd spread out looking for other bodies of water or different rivers. Oh,
Interesting.
drought conditions changing rivers.
Make sure you're writing these ideas down. These are great.
I'm not sure that young kids would be interesting to think about what they would come up with.
Well, I might do something with this with third grade in February, so I can let you know.
Yeah.
And I have examples that I'll be sharing a little bit later.
Oh, you got the drought. Good.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, but it's a great question, Laura.
Or like what kinds of resources would help? I don't know. Yeah, maybe a bit. I'd also be curious to know where the ports are, because I know Oakland has a port.
Mhm.
And
It's a great question. Write that down. That's a great question
Well,
to be thinking about.
So, do you somewhere on here, do we have like water quality?
we don't have it there yet, but you can add it.
Quality pollution regulations.
Great. I'm going to bring everyone back now, but thank you for participating and for your awesome model and ideas. This is great.
More of a stack of stickies than an actual model, but you know, we tried.
It's great. It's a good start. Lots of good ideas to explore.
Sorry, I have to stand in front of my light so it doesn't shine.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for participating and all of your awesome ideas and sharing. So I just wanted to, again, in a classroom, we'd be taking a lot of time to unpack these ideas, right? And share out and probably do a gallery walk and lots of other things. But in the interest of time, because we're very time limited today, I'll just show really quickly both models. So again, some great ideas from group one about like, what did it look like 40 years ago? Well, there was less building, but maybe there was more hunting, and maybe there was more water available. But maybe the population was recovering from hunting, ideas about water, right? And then today, maybe there's less fish, or but there are more buildings. And again, when otters have less hunters, the fish populations will increase. So maybe there's less competition, right? Maybe the currents have changed. So again, thinking a lot about water, a lot about food. Again, things that we can directly relate back to climate change. And then group two, these are great ideas. Again, ideas about hunting and where the ports are, like thinking about human movement and populations and drought conditions, again, water and pollution and population growth. Again, coming up with the idea of hunting and food. And then did they move because they were looking for better food sources? Were they food limited in some ways? So again, really great ideas, all that can be related back to how our world is changing due to climate change. So just to pick up where we left off, again, if we were doing this in a classroom, we'd spend a lot more time unpacking this. And I just want to show you a few other examples. This was an example from a previous workshop, again, using arrows and words and those icons and the stickies in the way that you did to show all of those interrelationships. Sometimes students do a lot of drawing to share their ideas, and again, connections, lines to show those relationships, ways, writing directly on it, and crossing things out or adding more things to show how things have changed over time. So again, you can see how engaging in this kind of activity really gets students to think about, okay, here's a model that actually does represent these types of interactions, right? Interactions between the geosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. Like a lot of you were thinking about clean air, clean water, how different populations and food sources have changed, what the landscape looked like, right, with urbanization. So this is a way to describe those interactions, and also constructing an argument from evidence. So the idea is that over time, we would be thinking about why these otters have survived, are surviving and thriving in the Bay Area now. What has changed? And why were they not able to survive there in the past? What was the habitat change that led to that? So again, lots of ways you can use this type of modeling to get at standards like this and introduce that kind of content. And you can really even extend this model. Like, let's think about the future now. And especially when we're talking about climate change education, we want students to be able to envision a future of where do we think otters will be able to live in the future? Where do we hope they will be able to live 40 years in the future now, if we think about how we're affecting our climate and our ecosystems. So again, lots of opportunities for expanding this modeling. So I just want to show you now how this kind of activity fits into the larger understanding global change ecosystem of resources, and show you the framework and the modeling tools very quickly. And again, I know we're short on time, but the idea is that these concepts, all of these many concepts that you came up with to try to explain this phenomenon of the otters shifting their range, can be worked into a framework that's made up of three main components. So things like the causes of change, so like humans, what humans are doing, right? And then that there are ways that the Earth system works, like thinking about, a lot of you talked about water and the water cycle, or species interactions, how species are gonna, again, humans and non-human species, and also prey and predator species, right? How do they interact? These are big processes that affect the way the Earth works. And then there are things that we could measure over time. People, talked about pollution and water quality and temperature, and just, the amount of food that's available, right? Things like that. And just the ranges, like where things live, right? That's something that we can change over time. So this is a general model for thinking about how you can organize all of those big ideas that you represented in your models. So again, when I often introduce this model, again, I'm introducing this to you as adult learners, though. This is not how I would go about it with elementary, but you can use this as a tool for thinking about your organization of these ideas. So we can start with this, how the Earth system works. And again, a lot of you were talking about are things related to the water cycle and also how species, including humans, would interact, right, in their environment. And then if we think about what those causes are that you mentioned, so again, I introduced some of these ideas in your model based on your questions, the building, cities, fishing and hunting, pollutants and waste, but we can also start thinking about, again, burning of oil, gas, and coal. So like, what does this do to our climate and how does that change things? And then also creating natural habitats, right? We've definitely, there's actually been a lot of restoration work in the San Francisco Bay Area in certain places that have probably helped restore those river otter populations in certain areas. And then finally, we can turn our attention to, again, what are those measurable changes? And a lot of the ones that you talked about were, again, like the amount of food that's available, what's the biodiversity like in different areas, and then, where organisms live. That's kind of the big thing that we're trying to measure and understand, is what causes organisms to shift where they're living over time. And then finally, again, some of you mentioned air temperature. Sometimes people also can connect this learning obviously to sea level rise, because sea level rise changes our coastlines and where river otters could live at that ocean river interface in our watersheds. And so the way that we've used this with elementary students is by sharing with them this very simple version with just the words. Instead of atmosphere, we just use air, life, water, and earth, right? And we can think about this as like a word board, and we can introduce big ideas over time as students articulate them, as students learn about them and think about them. What are the things that are affecting our otters? And this is a way of us to organize those ideas. And I do just want to show you really quickly, again, we're not going to have too much time to unpack it, but there's a really complex version of this diagram that has a lot of different concepts and ideas represented. We call this the everyday language version, because instead of saying things like ocean circulation, we say movement of water in the ocean. So to make the language more accessible to all learners of any age, but we see this working well with younger learners, especially. I wouldn't introduce the full complexity of this to younger learners, but it is a way for you as a teacher to be thinking about what are the topics that you can hit on and connect back to climate change, right? Thinking broadly about how you create that basis for understanding the complexity of climate change and how climate change touches everything. This is a way for you to visualize those connections. So the way I think about it is that this framework is sort of a lens through which you can see all this science content that you know and work with your students. And it's kind of also a you are here map. It's like, okay, you're talking about water quality as it relates to the otters today, but let's also think about how climate change can affect water quality or the water cycle. And let's draw those connections and think about where we're going tomorrow to, again, the you are here and where are you going map of learning about climate change and the interrelatedness of the Earth system. If we had more time, we would look at this together and we would think about, like, what do you teach? What are the topics? Like, circle them and then try to draw some connections across them. For example, if you teach about photosynthesis or how plants grow, or you're teaching about species interactions, like, what are the other things that you could be teaching within that context, right? So again, this really brings us back to the idea of information versus knowledge, that we want to not just have students learn and understand, the definitions or what these are, but really connect the dots and think about how all of these processes and changes are interrelated and affect one another. And so what we've done is create a set of tools that allows you to actually take the pieces of that framework, like the little icons that I included in your modeling page on your Jamboard, and you can create visualizations. So this is, again, is a teacher model that's pretty complex, but the idea is that you would refine this and figure out like which connections are most important that we want students to be able to learn, and then can they represent those connections themselves in their own models and make their thinking and learning visible. So we have various ways of doing this. You can use this using, laminated posters and cards, but we also have a digital version, which I'll show you in a second. We have all of these little icons on PowerPoint, so you can grab these and move them around and edit them and arrange them as appropriate for your students. So again, you don't show them all of them at once, but you can select the ones that you need. So it allows you for a way to, draw connections and explain cause and effect relationships, right? So like, here are some of the connections that some of you are articulating today about, maybe fishing and hunting was changing where the otters could live, or maybe this is about creating more natural habitats for them. And that's why they've been able to move into some of these areas. So I'll just show you really quickly that there's a way to do this digitally. You can make models, especially again for lower grade levels. I would use this for planning, for thinking about what are the big ideas you want to connect. And this is a clean selected resource. So you can also get some great teaching tips and support on clean. And then just in the last few minutes that I have with you, what I want to do is share with you what this actually looks like in the classroom. So that's what's been really wonderful, is over the last couple of years, we've been able to really support teachers in implementing these resources in the classroom and using the river otters as an anchoring phenomenon. And again, I'm presenting that to you today as an example. You could use any organism in your environment or that's relevant to your students and the environment around your school. But so one of our teachers to really organize this unit, set up this wall that has, again, that driving question, which I introduced to you today, like how, why have they returned to Marin in the last 40 years? They have an I wonder board. So this is a lot of their big questions, right? Then I asked you to generate those questions. Then we had students generate those group models, right? And one side of those models was 40 years ago and the other was today. What's the difference? They did a lot of exploration around otter structure and function. So actually connecting to like the evolution of otters and why do river otters look the way that they do? And what purpose do some of their structures serve in the way that they eat and interact with their environment? And then finally, they made a group model. So each of these stickies, I'll show you a blown up version of this. So, here's a shot that's closer up of some of those models and the structure and function, and looking at the otters and their whiskers and their ears and their feet. And then if you look at this final part of the board, so these cards are the icons that are represented on our framework, right? So pollution and fishing and hunting and building cities, right? These are things I gave you today. And then what they did was they created a model showing all of these complex interactions. And what this allows is for students to, again, really visualize like what they're learning about the complexity of the world that they live in. And it really prepares them for thinking about climate change, especially at higher grade levels. This is the foundation. This is really important stuff, right? Even if they're not digging into the details of like the chemistry and the physics, like this really introduces them to that idea of environmental change and all the interactions across the four spheres that we need people to understand about why do we care about climate change? Why is it so important and all encompassing? But we do talk about changes in air temperature, changes in sea level. Like these are things that some of our teachers have tackled within this unit to talk about how that would affect where the river otters can live. So again, I know we're a little over time and I want to honor your time today, but again, we really started with just this one disciplinary core idea, right, about biodiversity and humans and populations and where they can live, and the reality that climate change can affect all of those things. And again, we used a lot of those modeling practices and GSS practices to make that thinking visible. So I don't really have time for the website tour, but I just want to point out to you that there's an easy way to learn more about UGC, Understanding Global Change, the larger program that this is a part of. There's a UGC 101. If you go to the What is Global Change, you can click through a slideshow if you want to get a more detailed introduction to this framework. There's also a clickable version of the framework, so you can navigate the site content, and there are articles about each of the topics in the framework that you can access on the website. There are also some really great example models on some of the pages that you can use from and build from for your own purposes. And then finally, there's just a lot of ways to navigate the content, and there are all of these visuals that you're seeing, this earth scene that you saw, the icon sets, which you used a little bit in your models, and then that infographic, the framework, all of these are downloadable and free on our website. And I also just want to point out that we have a program with different groups across the country where we support teachers in really building their own units. And we do have a planning guide that came from that work that you can use independently, but I would also encourage you to please reach out and be in touch if you're interested in using these materials in your classroom. So with that, I just want to thank my team at Berkeley, at HHMI, also our advisory board that worked on this project. And you can feel free to contact me at this address, and please check out our website and follow us on Twitter. So thank you very much. I'm sorry that we're a little over time, but thank you so much for your participation, and it was great working with you and talking with you today. And I'm happy to stay on a few more minutes to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, Jessica. That was great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Person left. Ezekiel, do you have any questions for us? Oh, are we open? Are you open to collaboration? Are you talking about Clean? Or are you talking about Jessica's work, or both?
We're very open to collaboration. I'd love to hear from you about like what your needs are, what you're planning, and how we can support you. I work personally with a lot of school districts, K-12 across various grade levels. So to really revise curricula and write new units and resources and make them local and locally relevant, right? So let me know, what you're thinking. And then of course,
let me tell you a little bit.
Great.
I'm part of something called Global Green Education. We can discuss later if you want because of the time, but I will put the website. Yeah, so you can have an idea. We use something called digital agriculture or agriculture 4.0. I don't know if you're familiar with those concepts, but it makes a huge difference for the environment now, because we have sensors and technology that also help reduce the damage we're doing to the environment as humans,
Yes. Yeah. So however our resources can support you in that initiative and that work. And sorry, Alicia, do you want to stop recording?